Assalamu alaikum. We're going to start in just a moment, inshallah ta'ala.
Alaikum salam.
Alhamdulillah. Brother Frank, how you doing today?
Alhamdulillah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. I'm doing well.
Good.
We were just reading one of the books that you sent for the boys the other night.
Alhamdulillah. That's great. That's great. Good to hear it. Dr. Habib.
What was that?
Dr. Habib.
Yes.
It's Frank.
Yes. Walaikum
salam. I realize the problem I have is I don't know all the names of the positions of the prayers. I'm going to have I'm going to have to go back and figure that out myself. I think I did figure it out before my chemo. So
no, I understand. We can go back over that. That's no problem. We can go back over it briefly today, and then we can even do it again.
Well, isn't that pretty involved? Each position of the prayer.
It's not too bad. Well, let me. Let me take care of the feedback situation. Okay, there we go. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can everybody hear me?
Walaikum salam. Yes.
Good. The volume is a little bit low for me, so I might need folks to speak up. But yeah, that's no problem. We can go back over that.
I don't want to. I can go over it myself, but I don't want to.
I'll just do a quick review. Won't take no more than 5 minutes tops, inshallah.
Thank you. Shukran.
That's fine. The volume is a little okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. الحمد لله. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم إني أسألك من كل خير سألك منه محمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وأعوذ بك من كل شر استعاذك منه محمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم اغفر لنا ما قدمنا وما أخرنا وما أسررنا وما أعلنا وما أنت أعلم منا ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من فتنة المحيا والممات ومن فتنة القبر ومن فتنة المسير الجاد ومن عذاب النار والمصير. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد ورضي الله عن أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. يا همة الشيخ احضرنا بها المحضر ولتأتي بنظرة تأتينا بالأخضر. أما بعد. الحمد لله. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Okay, so inshallah we will go ahead and start. I'm trying to pull up the hadith that I wanted to mention today. But this is not a hadith that has this is not a hadith that I'm sharing because anything that has happened or anything like that. I always want to mention that to people because I know sometimes people may feel, may wonder if I ever have anything direct in the way of advice, inshallah ta'ala, I will try to be direct. So, don't ever think that I'm criticizing anyone through this, inshallah. And I actually cannot find the exact hadith that I wanted to share. So rather than take a bunch of time, I'm going to read a different hadith, inshallah ta'ala. So this hadith is from Sahih Bukhari. I'm going to read sort of three versions of the same hadith. So this is, I'm trying to see which book in Sahih Bukhari is from. I don't see it here, but I'll just read it. This hadith is narrated from Mu'adh ibn Jabal, radiallahu anhuma, who reported that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Beware of the supplication of the oppressed, for there is no veil between it and Allah," meaning the supplication. And in another narration, Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Beware of the supplication of the oppressed, for it ascends to Allah as if it were a flare." This hadith is graded as Sahih. And in another narration, Khuzaymah ibn Thabit radiallahu anhuma reported that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Beware of the supplication of the oppressed, for it is carried above the clouds. Allah Almighty says, by my might and majesty, I will help you in due time." And I'll read one more that is mentioned here along with the others. It says Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu reported that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "The supplications of three are never turned back: a fasting person until he or she breaks their fast, a just leader, meaning a good leader, a righteous leader, a fair leader, and the supplication of the oppressed is raised above the clouds by Allah. The gates of heaven open for it, and the Lord says, by my might, I will surely help you in due time." And I'm going to read one more just so I can do 5, because the witr, the odd, is the sunnah. It is reported from Aslam that Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu appointed a client of his named Hunay to tend the pasture and said, so this is actually not a hadith, but this is what they call an athar, a report from Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And it looks like it's mentioned in Sahih Bukhari, however. But it is reported that Umar radiallahu anhu said to Hunay, "O Hunay, lower your wing for the Muslims and beware of the supplication of the oppressed, for the supplication of the oppressed is answered." And I wanted to also read that last one when I saw it just now, because it mentions lower your wing for the Muslims, meaning the wing of mercy, meaning be compassionate, be gentle, be easy with the Muslims, with the believers, with the people in your community. And of course, you know that the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was to be good and gentle with everyone in general, but even more so with the Muslims. You know, you should be gentle with the Muslims, and you should be harsh with the people who are oppressing and being enemies to the Muslims. In any case, dua is the weapon of the believer, and the Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has informed us in various ahadith, like the few that we just mentioned, that the dua of the oppressed is one of the duas that Allah Ta'ala answers, right? That He does not turn away. So I share that hadith, again, not because there's anything in particular that anyone here has done or anything like that, but we should take from that hadith two reminders. One is that if we are in a position of power, we should be careful not to use our power unjustly, not to use our power, our authority in a way that is oppressive. So we should be mindful, whether that be parents with your children, fathers with your family, husbands with your wives, maybe you employ people, maybe you're a person who has some status in the community, maybe you're a person who has some status in the circle of your friends. Whatever kind of leadership Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has endowed you with, we have to be careful to use it in a way that is fair and with rahmah, with compassion, with gentleness, with ease, and with a desire to help the people, not lord over the people, because we don't want to be among the oppressors, because that is among the worst of the things to be in the sight of Allah Ta'ala, and we don't want to be the people that oppressed people are making dua against. And also it should remind us that if we find ourselves, or if we find people that we care about in a situation where they are being oppressed, then we should make dua. One, because the dua of the oppressed is accepted, and because this is a form by which aid and support can come to the people that are oppressed. And the oppressor will face justice. The oppressor will face justice. I remember I was listening to a speech from Malcolm X, and not long ago was the birthday of Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, rahmatullahi. May Allah give him paradise and accept him as one of the martyrs, and have mercy on him, and continue to make his life and legacy a source of benefit to the people all over the world. We should people like that, we should keep in our dua. We should make it a habit, even if it's just at minimum once a year, maybe on his birthday, to make some dua, make Fatiha, make Salatu al-Fatih, read some Quran for Malcolm. But I was listening to one of his speeches where he was saying, the idea of praying for your oppressor just didn't make no sense to him. He said, if anything, I'm going to pray that Allah punish my oppressor, And this is from our deen, Our deen teaches us to be merciful and compassionate and forgiving. It also teaches us to stand up for justice. And so even in the Quran, it teaches us that to forgive the person that has harmed you is a part of the deen, and to seek justice against the one that has harmed you is a part of the deen, And so when you see the kind of like rampant oppression and inequality and, killing of the environment, I was listening to something today that mentioned the United States is the #1 exporter of weapons all over the world. And we know many of the places where these weapons are used, they're used to harm innocent women, men, children, Muslims often, we should be in the habit of making dua that Allah Ta'ala give justice to the oppressed people. Alhamdulillah. But I won't go any further with that, because I didn't say that to get on the soapbox, but I thought, that's one of those hadith that I kind of always go to. And so to start with hadith of it, since I couldn't find it when I initially wanted to share, that was a good one to share. Tayyip. Assalamu alaikum. I see my dad is in the mix. Assalamu alaikum.
You call me my dad. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Oh, my dad and my uncle.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Oh my God. I don't know what I'm gonna eat, brother.
MashaAllah.
Inshallah. Fish breakfast.
Alhamdulillah. Dad, where you at?
I'm here.
Alhamdulillah. Good. Welcome. We're gonna jump in.
Still black and still in New York, brother.
I hear that. Alhamdulillah. Well, we're gonna jump back into where we left off last week, inshallah, at Sujood Sahw. And we, as I mentioned, we're gonna start today with some scenarios for the person who joins the Salat late after the Imam has started. So, joining the Salat late after the Imam has started. So, the section starts by mentioning 2 points. First, it says the cutoff point for joining a rak'ah is its ruku', i.e., if you join after the ruku'. Oh, subhanAllah, Brother Frank actually mentioned that it might be helpful to do a quick review of some of the names of the positions in the salat. So actually, this will not take very long, and I'm gonna say them, and then maybe as we're doing question and answers, if I remember, I can type them too, so you can have a you can see them visually. But the first position of the prayer is called Pian. Pian. This means standing, to stand. So when we do the Takbiratul Ihram, when we recite Fatiha in some verse from the Quran, all of this we do in Qiyam, standing, Qiyam. Like you may remember the term Yawm al-Qiyamah. Yawm al-Qiyamah. This is the day of standing, right? The day of judgment. Qiyam is standing. Then you have ruku', which means to bow. I don't remember the Arabic offhand, and I don't want to mess it up, but there's a well-known verse in Quran that says, bow with those who bow, bow with those who bow. So ruku' is the bowing. Then we go back to qiyam. After we bow, we stand back up in qiyam, and then we go into sajdah, or sujood, or sajdah and sujood, doing the same thing. This is to prostrate, to put your face on the ground. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Nick. Welcome. I got what you sent too. Alhamdulillah. It says it's connecting audio, so I'll say it again. You can hear. But after the second qiyam, we go into sajdah. All right. Then after sajdah, we go into jalsa. Jalsa is the sitting position. So after we're in sajdah, we sit in jalsa. And then we go back to sajdah again. Right? And then we go back to sajdah again. So there's 2 sajdas or 2 sujood. And then the jalsa is what comes in between the 2. And then after that, depending on which rak'ah it is, you'll either stand up in qiyam and start it all over again, or you'll go back to the sitting position in jalsa if it's the second rak'ah, right? And then if it's a prayer that has more than 4 rak'ah, after that you'll go back to qiyam and start the whole process over again. So you have qiyam, ruku', qiyam, sajda, jalsa, and then sajda again. So every rak'ah is going to have those 6 positions. And really it's 4 positions, right? Because qiyam comes twice and sajda comes twice. But you have qiyam, ruku', qiyam, sajda, jalsa, and then sajda. Those are the positions of the prayer. That's what they're called. Like I said, I'll try to type them in, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Nick. Welcome. I got what you sent too. Alhamdulillah. Jazakumullah khair. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. I know people who were here before. I didn't say everybody's name, but I see everybody's name. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to everyone. So yes. So going back to the lesson, the cutoff point for joining a rak'ah is its ruku'. In other words, if you join after the ruku' of the first rak'ah, you have missed the first rak'ah, right? So when do you have to join the prayer to be able to say that you have taught that rakat, right? That rakat. It's ruku'. If the imam has started the prayer, or if you're in in your household and someone started praying and you're going to join the prayer with them, if they have not yet, and just so everybody knows, whenever I hear like noise or it sounds like you're talking in the background, or I hear background noise, I'm muting you. But if I'm muting you and you're trying to talk, then let me know. Unmute, or type something in the chat so I know. Type. Yeah, if you see someone praying and you want to join them in the prayer, if you catch them before they go to ruku or while they're still in ruku, then you can consider that you've caught that whole rak'ah. If the imam is praying Salatu Dhuhr and he's in ruku, he's bowing, and you're able to join the salah and go into ruku before he stands up for the next, stands up into qiyam and says, Sami Allahu liman hamida, you're able to get there before he does that, then you've caught the whole prayer. You don't have to make up that rak'ah. You've caught that first rak'ah with him, and you've caught all of Dhuhr with him, right? But if he goes into ruku and he stands up and says, Sami Allahu liman hamida, and then you join the prayer, then you've missed that first rak'ah, and you're going to have to make that rak'ah up again after. And I believe that's a review for a lot of you. So, but if you know, if anything's unclear or you need me to say it again, please, you know, stop me, raise your hand, type a note in the chat, or just yes.
Salam alaikum. You would, if you weren't able to make up that prayer because you came in after the ruku was finished, you would still pray the prayer, and because you're out of respect, you would pray the prayer where you come in, but then at the end of that, you would have to do the whole prayer again.
No, you wouldn't have to do the whole prayer again. You mean if you came after the ruku of the first rak'ah?
Yes. Yes.
No, you don't have to do the whole prayer again. You only have to do that first rak'ah again.
Oh, okay.
You only have to do that first rak'ah. So if you're making Dhuhr, you gotta make 4 rak'ah, right? If you catch 3 rak'ah with the imam, then you just make up the one you missed. If you catch 2 rak'ah with the imam, then you make up the 2 that you missed. If you catch 1 rak'ah with the imam, you make up the 3 that you missed, right? And the way that you can gauge whether or not you've caught the rak'ah, that particular rak'ah, is if you join the prayer while he was still in ruku or before he went to ruku, right? So if you join him, so once he makes ruku, that means that rak'ah, you can't say that you've caught that rak'ah, but you don't have to make the whole prayer again. No, you just make the rak'ah that you missed.
Shukran.
So just to say it again, the cutoff point for joining a rak'ah is its ruku. So if you join after the ruku of the first rak'ah, then you have missed the first rak'ah, and you have to make that 1 rak'ah over again. The second point they mentioned, they say, if you find yourself in that position where you're praying behind an imam, you join the prayer late, you're praying behind the imam, but you're going to have to make up some of the prayer. You didn't catch the whole prayer. You caught the last 3 rak'ah of Dhuhr behind the imam, but the first rak'ah you got to make up. In that situation, you do not say Salam at the end of the prayer. When the imam salams out of the prayer, you don't say Salam. You keep your head still. And after the imam and the people behind the imam say the Salam, really just after the imam says the Salam, right? After the imam says the Salam, you stand up and complete whatever you missed, right? Excuse me. And you make that rakat up the same way you would have if you were, the same way the imam would have done it if you caught him. So in other words, if it's Salatu Dhuhr, the first rakat of Salatu Dhuhr, you say it silently and you say some verses from Quran after it, right? So when the imam salams out, you stand up and you're going to make 1 full rakat to replace the rakat that you missed, right? And you're going to say it silently and you're going to say some verses from Quran after you say the Fatiha. Let's say you missed the first verse, the first rakat of Salatul Maghrib, right? In that case, then when the imam finishes the prayer and salams out, you stand up, you make 1 rakat aloud, and you make some verses of Quran after you say the Fatiha. So you're gonna make it up exactly as the imam would have made it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Danielle. Welcome. So, just to recap, the cutoff point for joining a rak'ah is the ruku', right? So if you catch the ruku' of a prayer behind the imam, then you can say you caught that rak'ah with the imam. If you join after the imam has finished the ruku', then you have to make that rakat up. So if If you join, the Imam is making Salatu Dhuhr and you join the prayer and you join after the ruku' of the second rakah, then that means you have 2 rakah you have to make up at the end of the prayer. And the second point they make is that the way you do it is when the Imam salams out of the prayer at the end, you don't salam, you keep your head straight, and after the Imam salams, you stand up and you make up whatever of the prayer you missed. So however many rakah that you missed. Yes, Salam alaikum. I see someone has their hand up. I don't see the name, it just says iPhone 2, so I don't know who it is.
I don't know if it's mine. I have my hand.
Oh yeah, that's you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam. How you doing?
A question about the tahiyyat. And
Yes.
you probably cover this, or maybe I should wait and let you go to it. But
That's okay.
if you making the tahiyyat, should you make that with the imam and the jamaat, and then
Yes.
when you after you make it, should you repeat it again?
So you're saying if you join the prayer late, correct?
Right.
So let's say you missed the first rakah of Salatu, right? So at the end of the prayer, the Imam is going to say a tahiyyat, and you're going to be sitting behind him, and you should say that tahiyyat, the tahiyyat too, the tahiyyat, the shahada, the du'as that you would make at the end of the prayer, all the things you would normally say, you say them until the Imam salams out of the prayer. You know, at least he makes the first salam to the right. And then when the Imam salams out of the prayer, you stand up, you make the rakah that you missed, and then you say the tahiyyat and everything as you normally would again at the end of the prayer. So you would end up saying it twice. And I remember when we asked Sheikh Amin this question, he said, anytime you have the opportunity to make the dua and whatnot in the prayer, it's a blessed opportunity. You should take the opportunity. So when you're sitting behind the Imam waiting for him to salam out, you know, you could just say nothing and your prayer will be accepted because the Imam covers you. But it's good if you take the opportunity, as you normally would, to say the tahiyyat, to say the shahada, say the prayers on the Prophet ﷺ, the du'as for the Muslims, all the things that you would normally say at the end of prayer. But then when you finish the prayer, after you make up the rakat that you missed, you have to say it again to complete the prayer. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Alhamdulillah.
Yes, sir. Shukran.
Now the book actually gives a chart where it mentions how you go about making each of the 5 prayers based on if you missed 1 rakat behind the Imam, if you missed 2 rakats behind the Imam. And the chart is very thorough, but I find it to be a little confusing when I first encountered it, right? It made me more confused, right? So I'm not gonna go through the chart word for word, but I am going to talk about the chart a little bit. So one of the things that we get from the chart, and I go through the first line so you understand what I mean. So let's say, and actually I can go through the whole chart, but I don't want you to get confused. I just go through it kind of briefly, and then we'll talk about what we're supposed to get out of it. Bismillah. So let's say you are praying Salatu Subh, right? You're joining Salatu Subh after the Imam has started, right? Okay, I'm done. Last question. Alhamdulillah. I just might ask a question. I'll answer them in a moment. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum, Hajj Khadija. Welcome. So let's say you're joining Salatu Subh and you join after the first rakah. So the Imam has already made the ruku' of the first rakah. So you missed that rakah. You're going to say the second rakah with him. Then after that, you're going to make up the 1 rakah that you missed, right? And you're going to say a surah or some verses from Quran after Fatiha in each rakah, right? and you're going to say the attashahud in both rak'ah, right? Because the first rak'ah you caught was the imam's final rak'ah, second rak'ah. So you're going to say the attashahud with him as he does as he ends the prayer. Then you're going to stand up and make up the rak'ah that you missed. And at the end of it, now you have to end the prayer. So you're going to say the attashahud a second time, right? So that's how this chart works. It breaks down. So now we go into Salatu Dhuhr, right? Let's say you missed the first rak'ah. So you're going to say the second, third, and fourth rak'ah with the imam, right? Then after the imam salams out, you have one more rak'ah to do, right? So you're going to say one rak'ah by yourself after the imam makes salams. You're going to say a surah or some verses from Quran, right? In your first rak'ah, which is the imam's second rak'ah, right? And also in your last rak'ah, because that's the rak'ah that you missed saying with the imam. You follow me? So the imam said his first rak'ah, and he said a surah after he said Fatiha in Salatu Dhuhr. You missed that. You caught the second rak'ah, the third rak'ah, and the fourth rak'ah. Then you're going to make up that first rak'ah that you missed, and that first rak'ah that you missed was a rak'ah where the imam says some verses from Quran after Fatiha. Follow me? So then in your final rak'ah, which is actually the first rak'ah that you're making up, you're going to say some verses of Quran after Fatiha, right? And you're going to end up saying the attashahud in the first rak'ah that you caught with the imam, because it was his second rak'ah, right? The final rak'ah that you caught with the imam, because it was his fourth rak'ah, and in the rak'ah that you make after he salams out to make up for the one that you missed, that's going to be your final rak'ah. So you got to say the attashahud again at the end before you salam out, because in your final rak'ah, you're always going to say the attashahud. Is that clear?
That's confusing.
I know, and that's why I'm not going to go through the whole chart. I'm just giving you a taste. That's how thorough the book breaks it down. And it even mentions that there's names for some of these prayers where you make it in a different way. So they call this prayer where you miss the first rak'ah of Salatu Dhuhr or Salatu Asr or Salatu Isha, a 4 rak'ah prayer, where you miss the first rak'ah. They call it the prayer with wings, right? They call it the prayer with wings. And they call it the prayer with wings because you're going to end up making a tashahud in your first rak'ah, which you call with the imam, and in your final rak'ah, which is replacing the first rak'ah. And so they say it has wings. So they have different names. They have one they call the upside down prayer, one they call the pregnant prayer. But these are not things that you actually need to know and to understand to be able to pray your prayer properly. This is just kind of like extra information about how the scholars kind of refer to it, right? So I don't want to confuse you with all of that. The principle, and if you get the principle, you got it. If you get the principle, you got it. The principle is any rak'ah that you miss with the imam, meaning any rak'ah that the imam made before you joined the prayer, and we said the way we already said, just a quick recap, if you join the prayer before the imam finishes his ruku, then you caught that rak'ah with the imam. If you join the rak'ah after the imam has stood up from ruku, then you missed that rak'ah, and you have to make that rak'ah over again, right? Even if you do everything else, you say, he says, Sami Allahu liman hamida, you join the prayer, you say, Rabbana wa lakal hamd, then you go on the Sajdah, you missed that rak'ah because you missed the Fatiha and the verse of Quran and the ruku, right? But if you catch the ruku with the imam, then it's like you caught the Fatiha and everything. You caught the rak'ah with the imam. So if you join after the ruku, you have to make that rak'ah up again, right? Any rak'ah that the imam completed before you join the prayer, you have to make up. And you say that rak'ah the way the imam would have said it. So let's say you are joining the Imam for Salatul Asr, and he makes the first 3 rak'ah, and you catch the final rak'ah, the 4th rak'ah with him, right? That means you have to make the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd rak'ah after the Imam salams out. Follow me?
Yes.
The 1st rak'ah, you make the same way the Imam would have made his 1st rak'ah, which means you're going to say it silently. And after you say Fatiha, you're going to say a surah or some verses of Quran after it, right? Then you're going to make your 2nd rak'ah, right? Or well, actually, it's your 3rd, right? Because you caught 1 rak'ah with the Imam. You following me? So when you make that next rak'ah, you're going to make it to replace the 2nd rak'ah that you missed with the Imam. So you're going to say it silently, and you're going to say some verses of Quran afterward. And then you're going to make your final rak'ah, right? Which is replacing the 3rd rak'ah that you missed with the Imam. And in that rak'ah, you're going to say it silently, and you're not going to say any verses from Quran, because in the 3rd rak'ah of Asr, you just say Fatiha. You follow me? Is that part clear? It's getting confusing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So and this is the tricky thing about this lesson, because I found when I studied it, and even when I taught it before, it's like you get it, and then extra explanation makes you confused. And then you have to get it again. But the principle is, if you join the prayer late, you have to make up every rakat that you missed, right? That the Imam completed before you got there. And you make it up. So if you, to go back to that example, you caught the final rakah of Asr with the Imam. What do you have to make up?
3 rak'ahs.
3 rakah, right? So after the Imam salams out, you stand up to replace the rakah that you missed with the Imam. So in the first,
You don't salam out with him.
you don't salam out with him. He salams out, you stand up. If you forget and accidentally salam out, it's okay, it's no problem. But you shouldn't salam out with him. You shouldn't salam out with him. You stand up, and you're gonna make the 3 rakat that you missed. So now the first rakat that you make, are you gonna make it like you would make the first rakat of Asr? Or are you gonna make it like you would make the 2nd rakat of Asr? How are you gonna make it?
The first rak'ah.
Like the first rakat, which means you're gonna say Fatiha, and then what are you gonna say after Fatiha?
A recitation from the Quran.
Perfect. Exactly. Then you're gonna stand up and you're gonna make another rakah. How are you gonna make this rakah?
As the 2nd rak'ah. Same as the first one, except you would add the what's it called at the end? I forgot the name of it. The normal tashahhud, yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely.
It comes on the 2nd and the 4th rak'ah.
Right. Absolutely. Then when you stand up to make your 3rd rakat that you missed, how are you going to make that one?
The same way as you made the first rak'ah.
Right. Then how are you going to end it?
That's the good question.
You're going to make a tashahhud again.
Oh, okay, I see. You'll
Right.
make it again because it's your ending prayer.
Exactly.
You always need to end with an tashahhud, no matter where.
Exactly.
I see. Okay.
Exactly.
Well,
And yep. And that's it. And that's it.
so simply, it means that no matter what you have to make up, whatever the number is, 1 or 3 or 1 or 2 or 3, on the last one, you have to put an tashahhud.
Yes.
So that's the whole thing explained.
That's it. Yep. Alhamdulillah, you got it. And so this chart goes through, okay, in this situation, but I don't want to go through all that because that's going to be more confusing. But the key is the principle. How do other people feel? Do you have it? Do you need us to say it again? Someone said in the fourth, also the dua. Oh, right. So in the final, rakat that you catch with the imam, he's gonna make all of the things that you say at the end of the prayer, the tashahhud, the shahada, the duas at the end. And in your final rakat, after you've made up all the rakat that you need to make, you also are gonna do the tashahhud, the shahada, all the duas at the end, right? Does that answer your question? Yes, Sidi Hassan's question. Assalamu alaikum, Sidi Hassan. Inshallah, let me know if that answers your question. Yes, alhamdulillah. So let me check one thing. I want to make sure I'm not confused. Part 3. Not the first one. Yeah. There's one thing that there's a couple of opinions about, but I'm not even gonna go into that because then you're gonna unlearn, you're gonna be confused about what you're clear about now. So I'm not gonna do that. But alhamdulillah, I feel good that alhamdulillah we got it. There was another question someone asked privately in the chat, and it's a good question, but I don't really have a full-on answer for it. The question is, what are the spiritual meanings for each position in the prayer? And the person said they've heard that the reason for the prayer being complete if you catch the ruku is because after that we say Allah listens to those who praise him. When we stand up from ruku, we say Sami Allahu liman hamidah, means Allah hears. Sami Allah means Allah hears. In Arabic, the verb usually goes before the doer of the verb. So Sami Allah means Allah hears. Sami Allahu liman hamida, Allah hears the one who praises him, right? And then we answer by saying Rabbana wa lakal hamd, to Allah is due the praise. So someone said that they heard that the reason the prayer is accepted if we catch the ruku is because that's just before we say Allah listens to those or hears those who praise him. And I've never heard that. It sounds reasonable to me. I have no reason not to believe it. If you heard that from a source you trust, I would say that alhamdulillah, you can take benefit from that. And these kind of questions, when you talk about like the deeper spiritual meanings of the prayer, my specific answer to this question, what are the deeper meanings of each position in the prayer, is I don't know. But as a general rule, Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Muhammad, when it comes to the deeper meanings, insights, wisdoms behind the things that Allah Ta'ala has us to do, obviously the first thing you look at is the Quran. Sometimes the Quran tells you the deeper meaning, right? Then you look at hadith. Sometimes hadith tells you the deeper meaning, right? We know, for instance, that Sajdah is the position where, I believe the hadith says we're closest to Allah, right? And it's also a position where dua is answered, right? After you look at what the Quran and the hadith say, this is an area where you have room. This is where the position of the people who follow the madhabs and the people who follow tasawwuf is maybe a little different than some of the people who reject those things, right? But we believe that this is where you have some room. Allah may guide you to an understanding about this that is, maybe unique, right? Someone asked Sheikh Hassan Sisi, and I wasn't there, but I was told that someone asked him, can Allah reveal, I think he said, can Allah reveal a new revelation to a person or something like that. And Shaykh Hassan said, no, there's no more books after the Quran, but Allah can reveal a new meaning, right? Or a new dimension of meaning to you that maybe he hasn't revealed to other people, right? So in other words, this is where there's some room for you to have your own spiritual insight, your own experience with your Lord, but you can't take something that something that you think Allah has shown you and now force it on everybody else. I can't say, well, Allah showed me, or I just contemplated until I realized that the deeper meaning of this position is X, and this is the truth. No, this is what you think, right? And you might be right. You might be right. And scholars often have enough of a background and knowledge that there are certain things that they can say, okay, this is more likely to be correct because it matches up with other insights that other scholars have had, or it matches up with the hadith, or it matches up with this fiqh ruling, right? But just you and I, if we're making our we're making our dua, we're making our salat, and Allah shows us something, the best thing to do is if you have a relationship with the sheikh, like this happens to me. I'll be making dua, I'll be making my ibadah, and I'll think about a verse of Quran, and a particular understanding will come to me. And I'll go to Sheikh Mai. I'll go to my sheikh and say, Sheikh, this occurred to me while I was praying. There's times when I've done that and he said, yes, that is accurate. There's times when I've done that and he said, that's not quite right. Or, he'll bring a hadith to say, well, it's not quite right, or maybe it's better if you say it in this way. Or he'll just give me a even deeper understanding. So that's correct. And then he'll build on that. One time I said, Sheikh, does this verse of Quran mean X, Y, Z? And he said, maybe. He said, maybe. He said, it could be, right? So my understanding wasn't anything that was against what the Sharia says. There wasn't anything that was wrong. It could have been right, but he didn't feel comfortable just giving me the green light. Yes, that's true. He said, it could be, right? So that was an understanding I keep for myself, and it helps me to feel stronger about my faith, and helps me to, helps to encourage me to good practice. But I don't go and propagate that and tell everybody, look, Allah showed me this, and so this is the absolute truth, and you have to believe it too, right? Because it could be that, as I grow, maybe I'll get a better understanding, right? So this is the general attitude to have with this. So you hear people say things like, well, one of the reasons why Sajdah is such a great position is because you're putting your face on the ground, so it's the most humble position you can be in, right? You'll hear people say things like, Sajdah is the one position where your heart is over your brain, right? And I remember one person I heard, he said, if you look at animals all have to go into Sajdah because that's how they eat, right? But the human being can go through their whole life and never put their face on the ground, right? And so when the human being chooses to put their face on the ground to bow before their Lord, this is like the most humble position, the best position we can be in. And it's a position where your heart is over your head. All of these are beautiful things that I think about sometimes when I pray, to help me have a stronger feeling, like Sidi Hassan said, helps you have khushu', helps you have humility in your prayer, and all of it's good. But you shouldn't take these things that occur to you and try to promote them as binding, unless it's something that comes from one of the scholars that we trust, or something that's backed up by a hadith, or backed up by the opinion of, one of the Sahaba, like Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhu. The Prophet sallallahu prayed for him to have ta'wil. The Prophet sallallahu prayed for him to have understanding and to have, I don't know how to best translate ta'wil, but it's sort of like interpretation of the Quran, right? And so you find certain things that Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says when you read the books of tafsir, and it's like amazing. It's like goes beyond just sort of the surface level, obvious interpretation of the Quran. Like one time they came to, I believe it was Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, it might have been Abu Bakr, but I believe it was in Umar. And they asked him why he keep Ibn Abbas, who was much younger than among the Sahabas. He was a youngster. And they said, why do you show such favor to him and keep him around and whatnot? And he said, okay. He asked them, when the chapter was revealed to us, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا. When that verse, I think it's the 111th chapter of the Quran, I believe. When that chapter was revealed, what did you all understand from it? And the people who asked him, why do you show Ibn Abbas this special favor? When he asked them that, they said, they gave their understanding of the chapter, and it was kind of like the obvious understanding of the chapter. And then he asked Ibn Abbas, said, what do you get from this? And he said, I get from it that the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is going to return to Allah, is going to pass away soon. Right? And the people who asked the question were astonished. And Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, they said, yes, this was the understanding that those senior companions of the Prophet Islam, they said this was the understanding we got as well. So this is why Ibn Abbas has a different station, because his Allah has endowed him with this understanding and this insight beyond what the common people have. Right. So, sometimes you'll open the books of, and this is the last thing I say about this, and we'll move on. Imam Saeed Abdul Salam, may Allah be pleased with him, our first Tijani Muqaddam here in America, who is one of the founders of the Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood, which Malcolm's followers started when they left the nation. He used to say to us that, if you keep, doing the work, you keep on the path, eventually you may have an experience where you know something. You may not even know how you know it. Allah just give you the understanding of something, you know it. And then you open up the books and you see that the understanding that came to you is confirmed by what the scholars have said in the books, right? And so you may reflect on a verse of Quran, or reflect on the meaning of something in Salah, or reflect on the meaning of something in Hajj or something like that. And then you may open up the tafsir and see Ibn Abbas already said it. Or you may open up and see Ghazali, Imam Ghazali said that this is the deeper symbolism behind this position in prayer, or this act of Hajj or something like that, right? And this is, this is a beautiful experience, right? So, but, I share that just to say that there is something to be said for, with the Sufis, they sometimes call it ilham or kashf. This is like when Allah endows you with some kind of understanding through experience, right? But you want to be balanced. We don't want to be like the people who say that when Allah puts something on your heart, that it just doesn't matter. That if you don't see it in the book, that you throw it out. We don't go to that extreme. We also don't go to the extreme where we say that just because you think you understand something, you start to impose it on other people and force them to accept your understanding, because your understanding may just be for you, right? Does that make sense? Okay, alhamdulillah. And I hope that answers the question of the questioner a little bit. But basically, in terms of the deeper meaning of the positions of the prayer, I would say if somebody with knowledge, somebody who's well-grounded in knowledge shares with you something like that this is the deeper insight, the deeper meaning of this position in prayer, and alhamdulillah, if it's something that benefits you and helps you to have more khushu' in your practice and strengthens your faith, then alhamdulillah, you take it, right? And if it doesn't, you don't have to argue over it, because there may still be value in it for someone else, right? And you yourself you should ask yourself these questions. This is the kind of reflection when the Quran talks about ulul albab, the people of reflection. We should be thinking about what are the deeper meanings of the verses of Quran, what are the deeper meanings of our spiritual practice, all of that stuff, right? We should be reflecting on it. But that what comes to you is not, like prophecy. It's not like something that's perfect and something that everybody else has to subscribe to. He has to say, yeah, you mean the folks here in Philly where the evidence, where's the dalil? Bring your proof, right? You know, that's for those who may not know, City Hassan, Philadelphia, and in Philadelphia you have a lot of Salafi folks, and they're notorious for saying, you know, where's your proof? If you say this is what Imam Malik say, they may say, we don't, what that matter? We don't care about what Imam Malik. Where's the hadith? Bring the proof. And this is like not a very good way to be. This is kind of like ignorant to be extreme to that, you know, to that degree. And so if you have people like that, then you really don't need to be talking to them about something that Allah put on your heart, because they're not gonna accept it. So you don't need to cause fitna for yourself or for them. You know, last thing I'll say in reference to that, and then we'll move on, inshallah. A friend of mine told me he was in a masjid, and he prayed Sajdah, which some of the Malikis, they pray Sajdah with their arms to the side. It's a well-known position. Our position is we pray Qabd, but Sajdah is acceptable, and many of the Malikis say that is the stronger position. So alhamdulillah, that's a valid opinion. So he was in the masjid praying Sajdah, and he said, a guy, I think he said he was in Chicago, and a guy came up to him and said, oh, that's not how you pray. You're supposed to pray with your arms crossed, folded in front of you. And he said, oh, you know, I follow the position of Imam Malik. And they got into a little back. The guy said, who? And Imam Malik. And they got into a little short back and forth. And the guy basically called the imams of the madhab. He said, A'udhu Billah. He said something like, oh, we don't listen to these people. These are people of the fire. A'udhu Billah. A'udhu Billah. It's like horrible statement, right? And my friend who shared the story with me, he was so flabbergasted, and he took from that, he said, you know what? I don't want to even put ignorant people in the position to say such big, you know, problematic, sinful kind of statements out of their ignorance. So he said, the next time somebody comes to me and says, you're supposed to pray like this, he's going to say, oh, thank you. I didn't know. I'm a new Muslim. You know, like, just avoid the fitna, avoid the argument, and don't put the ignorant person in a position to say something that may harm their soul, you know. So, alhamdulillah. It is 10:05 for me, which means it's 11:12, 1:05 for you. So we're gonna end in a moment and have some question and answer. But I do want to go through a little bit more, maybe a couple more minutes, just to get through this next section, so we can make progress to get through the book, inshallah ta'ala. So we mentioned sujood sahwi before salams, and this is a recap. We said this last week. It must be said if you miss one major sunnah mu'akkada, or more than two minor sunnah, more than two sunnah khafifa. So if you miss three or more sunnah khafifa, you have to make sujood sahwi before salams. It is obligatory to say it if one major sunnah or three minor sunnahs, or more than three minor sunnahs. If you miss four or five minor sunnahs, also you have to make sujood sahwi before salams. So if you're making sujood sahwi because you omitted a sunnah mu'akkada or three or more sunnah khafifa, it's obligatory to make the sujood sahwi before salams in that position, right? If it is purposely not said when it is obligatory, then your prayer is invalid. If it is not said because you forgot, right? Oh, if it is not said because you forgot to say it and it's not obligatory, then your prayer is valid. So what they mean by this, the sujood sahwi before salams is obligatory. If you purposely omit it, then the prayer is invalid. If you forget to say it, then you actually, in that situation, you can say it after salams, right? And still cover yourself, right? So if you omit it, okay, you have to return to work. Okay. And I actually think that's actually a good place to end. And when we come back next week, we're going to talk about the sujood sahwi after salams, inshallah ta'ala. But we'll stop there. And we'll open up the floor for question and answers, inshallah ta'ala. If anybody has any questions regarding the sujood sahwi or any other topics that you need to discuss, inshallah. Bismillah. Questions.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi Rasul.
Wa alaikum salam. How you doing, beloved?
I'm wonderful. Alhamdulillah. So if we do join the Salat late, all right, and if we accidentally or mistakenly or forgetfully salam out if we join after the Imam has made the ruku.
I got it. Yep.
And we salam out when he salams out. We just stand up.
Yes.
And do we make salat? Do we do the Sajdah Saud?
Not for that. Not for that. No.
Not for that. Okay.
No. Yep. That's a small thing. The biggest issue with that is other people may think that you just didn't know any better. So they may have some other idea. They may come up to you to correct you, or they may not know that that it's not a big deal if you do it forgetfully, right? But it doesn't. No, if you forget, you just stand up and make the prayer as you normally would.
Okay, that's for how many rakats that you may have missed for the during the prayer, correct?
Right, whatever the number of rakats you missed during the prayer.
Okay, yeah. I got it.
We're gonna cover. We're gonna cover. I'm not gonna go through it now because I don't even remember it well enough to do it without looking at the book. But we're gonna cover what happens if the Imam has to make sujood sahwi and you join the prayer late. Like if the Imam made a mistake and you got to make the sujood sahwi, either for a mistake he made after you joined or before you joined, we're gonna cover that, right? Okay. But if the Imam salams out, there's no sujood sahwi necessary. He salams out, and you forgetfully salam out with him, then you just stand up and make the prayer as you normally would. Okay.
But if you join the prayer late and he makes those additional sujood, right? Additional sujood.
We're gonna cover that. We're gonna cover that in a week or two.
Okay. All right. But you follow it anyway, right?
We're gonna cover that in a week or two. I don't remember. Okay.
Okay.
Because it's a little bit complicated. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So I don't. So we'll.
All right. Okay. I won't press you.
Yeah. I think you make it with him if he makes it before salams, if I remember correctly. But let me not even let's wait so I can be sure that I'm giving you the right information, inshallah. Hello?
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm listening to you. I'm doing some other things. I'm listening.
No problem. Other questions? While I'm giving you all some time to ask your questions, I'm going to type in the chat the names of the positions of prayer. Other questions? Is that all for today? Wa alaikum salam.
I have a question about a term.
Okay.
Maharifa. I think I'm saying it correct. Say it again, please.
Maharifa. Yeah.
Nah. Can you explain that term to me?
Yes, I can. Hold on one second. I'll go ahead and type this. 5 Jalsa, the sitting, then 6 the sujood, prostration. You can also say Sajdah. So those are the 6 positions of prayer, inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Oh, yes, inshallah. to the private message. Yes, I will. So to answer your question, Maharifa literally means I'm gonna mute you, Haji. Well, I hear a little bit of it. Like, okay, the echo left. Alhamdulillah. Maharifa means it means knowing. It means knowledge. Do y'all hear the echo? Or is that just on my end?
I don't. Might be me.
Yes, I hear an echo.
I think it's from you, Haji Tas. I'm gonna mute you while I answer, but then unmute yourself if you need to ask a follow-up question, okay? Okay. So Marifa means like knowledge or knowing, but ilm also means like knowledge. So there's a difference between the word alama, which is one Arabic word that means knowledge or knowing something, and arafa, which is another word that has to do with knowing something. And the way it was explained to me is that ilm is a kind of knowledge that when you're talking about Allah, Allah has ilm because he has perfect knowledge of a thing. He already knew it before. He knew everything. He knew everything about creation before he created it, right? And we can talk about human beings having ilm as well, right? Ilm isn't just something that we use for Allah, but ilm is like knowledge, kind of generally. Marifa or arafa has to do with knowledge that you arrive at, like something you get to know, something you come to know. Like this is the verb that's used when Allah says in the Quran that he made us in nations and tribes so that we could know each other, so that we could get to know each other, right? I believe it's also the verb used when Allah says in the Quran, when he talks about Musa alayhi salam, when he says he kind of came to know of, he saw a fire, but he came to know of a fire, something like that. That one, I have to go back and look at the actual verse to be exactly sure of how to use it. But it's also used in reference to Musa alayhi salam in the Quran as well. But arafa or ma'rifa, this is a kind of knowledge that you arrive at, right? So oftentimes it's used for knowledge of Allah, right? Knowledge of Allah, meaning the knowledge that the human being arrives at regarding their Lord. So us coming to know Allah, tabarak wa ta'ala, it's not as simple as, well, we just have this knowledge. It's an experiential kind of thing. We get to know Allah, tabarak wa ta'ala. How do we get to know Allah? Well, we learn about his names and attributes. We learn what he has taught us about himself in the Quran, in the Revelation. And we learn through just our experience of life, right? Like looking at the universe, looking at Allah's creation, it gives us some level of knowledge about the creator, about our creator, about the creator of everything that exists, right? And then also when the people of Tasawwuf talk about how you clean your heart, you make dhikr, you do ibadah to clean your heart so that your heart can become a receptacle so that you can arrive at some more knowledge of Allah, right? So that's why sometimes you'll hear people talk about it as experiential knowledge, right? Sometimes they'll translate it as experiential knowledge. What they mean by that is it's not something that you just open a book, right? It's something that you come to know, right, through your experience. So this is ma'rifa. And you know, again, the literal meaning has to do with, you know, anything you come to know. It can even be coming to know a person, but it's a mustalahat. It's a how do you say that in English? It's a technical term that the scholars of theology and the scholars of tasawwuf sometimes use to talk specifically about the knowledge we obtain or the knowledge that Allah endows us with, he blesses us with about himself. So knowledge of Allah, ma'rifatullah, right? So this is ma'rifah. And again, the way we come to it is, you know, it's a gift. Allah blesses whom he pleases with knowledge of himself. And this is why the Sufis use sometimes terms like unveiling, right? Or ilham, inspiration, or unveiling is kashif, because we don't want to say that we can just arrive at it of our own volition, because, Allah endows whom he pleases with knowledge of himself. We can do ibadah from now until the end of time. And if Allah doesn't decree to give us some knowledge of him, we won't have it. But Allah is most merciful, and he created us so that we could come to know him. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu commented on the verse where Allah Ta'ala says that he created humankind and jinn only to worship him, right? Allah created humankind and jinn to worship him, to worship Allah. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says, in order to worship him, it implies that you know him, so you should try to know him. And so another way you can understand is that Allah created us so that we would get to know him, right? Get to know him. And of course, as we know him, worship him, obey him, love him, right? But get to know him, right? Some of the scholars, they say this is the most important knowledge that you can arrive at, is knowledge of Allah, right? Maharifatullah. So this is what people mean when they say Maharifa. I'll stop there unless you have a follow-up question about that, inshallah ta'ala. Hajjata.
No follow-up, but I just want to say I think this was close to what you were talking about before, about, arriving at some kind of, not revelation, but
right.
something that Allah awakened you to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay,
alhamdulillah. So the word, alhamdulillah, no problem. Is an excellent question. So the another term to know is wahi. Wahi is revelation. Wahi is just for the Prophet. Alayhim salam. No person after Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam can get wahi. So anybody tell you they got wahi, they got new revelation, a new book, new sharia, we don't listen to that. And there's people who have said that, like you have the Baha'i faith. They grow out of a movement of people who were part of the Muslim community. And one of their leaders said that he got revelation. And now they have a new book, and they pray, I think 3 times a day or something like this. We don't do that, right? We don't follow nobody who say that. No wahi after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's the Khatam al-Nabiyyin. He's the last of the prophets. But ilham, inspiration, or kashif, unveiling, this is something that is still open to the people. Allah blesses whom he pleases with an understanding of the revelation, with some understanding of his wisdom, with some knowledge of him, right? So that is acceptable. But we want to make that distinction. You have wahi, which is, some say prophecy or revelation, and then you have things like ilham, kashif, which is just sort of inspiration, deeper understanding, things like that, right? So that is, as you mentioned, connected to Maharifa. So I got a question on the text. And the sister's asking, she said, someone mentioned at a retreat she was at recently that boxing is haram because of punching in the face. Have I heard this? I have not heard that. And that's a tricky one. I would not say that this is a completely ridiculous statement, because we do know that in Islam, we're taught not to, harm one another. Even when you discipline your kids, you're taught, you discipline them by, you can spank them on their behind if you need to. And, then people have different philosophies. Some parents don't even like to do that. Some parents, they need to do that, but you don't do it to any extreme. You don't bring any real harm to the child. This is something that's haram. Like if you break the skin or break bones or anything like that, right? But just a spanking is permissible, but you don't hit the face, right? You don't smack your children, anything like that, because it's disrespectful. So from this, I can see why someone would say that, boxing may be problematic in the sense that, you're punching someone in the face. But on the other side, you have to learn how to defend yourself. This is actually a sunnah, right? And boxing can be a way to learn how to defend yourself, right? And the scholars sometimes will even make special allowances for people who specialize in a thing, right? So if your one of the best boxers in the world, and your boxing can become a way for you now to teach other people in the community how to defend themselves, and become a like someone like Muhammad Ali, right? Become someone who can give da'wah and help to promote Islam through your excellence in that field. Then I would not say it's haram, but I can understand where someone's coming from with that, right? So I think as a general ruling, the way I would look at that is, what's the intention? If you have some people that want to learn to box as a way to stay in good shape and as a way to learn to defend themselves, usually if you box, they give you headgear to protect your face, they give you gloves. So you're not really gonna hurt the person's face like that. I'm not, an expert boxer, so I could be wrong, but my understanding is there's protections to keep it from being something that's really gonna harm you. Now, does that mean that you should then go and become a professional boxer? If you have other avenues open to yourself, then maybe not, right? But, from my understanding, most people who pursue boxing, and become the best boxers in the world, they usually don't have a lot of other opportunities. They're usually folks who don't have a lot of opportunity, and this becomes the way in which they're able to do something to feed their families and to do something with their life. So I wouldn't say it's haram. I've never heard anyone say it's haram, but I don't want to just dismiss the comment, because I can kind of see where the person might be coming from in trying to say that we should avoid things that encourage us to harm one another, if that makes sense. But boxing is a martial art, and martial arts, learning the martial arts, whether it's wrestling, whether it's, things like karate or jujitsu or boxing, all of that's from the Sunnah. So I don't think any of our teachers would say boxing is haram. In fact, I just remembered Imam Sheikh Tijani was a boxer. Imam Sheikh Tijani was a boxer who's one of the biggest scholars of Islam in the world today. And when he was a student at Al-Azhar University, he was a boxer. So I think from that, we can categorically say, we know from our teachers that boxing is permissible, right? But I want to have some compassion, or I don't even know if compassion is the right word. I want to give room that the person who made that statement maybe was just trying to make the point that we should avoid things that encourage us to bring harm on one another. And I don't know if maybe the person was saying specifically for women or something like this, but even that, women should learn how to defend themselves too, So I'll say no, it's not haram, but I'd be curious to know what made that person say it was haram. Maybe they don't mean that it's categorically haram. Maybe they just mean that, there's some harm in it. And so, some people should avoid it. I don't know. Alhamdulillah. Someone said he heard he quit not to hurt people. Who? Imam Sheikh or Muhammad Ali?
Imam Sheikh.
You heard Imam Sheikh quit so he wouldn't harm people. MashaAllah.
He didn't like hurting people, is what I heard.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's telling. I never heard that, but I'm sure I have a feeling I know who you heard it from, and there's someone who would know. So yeah, I don't want to dismiss it. But I think it would be, our attitude should be that we should be, and I know the sister who asked the question, you're not doing this because you're asking a question about somebody else, something someone else said, but we should be hesitant to make something that is haram halal, and we should not be hesitant. We should be cautious not to make something that's haram halal, and not to make something that's halal haram. So unless there's a definitive proof of something being haram, we should avoid saying it's haram. We can say it's makruh. We can say we don't like it. Even Imam Malik, rahmatullahi alayhi, who has more knowledge of fiqh than Imam Malik? And Imam Malik, rahmatullahi, used to say things like, I don't like that. I wouldn't do that. I would avoid that. He would hesitate to say something was haram unless there was a definitive proof. And I know that was probably a longer answer than it needed to be.
Yeah. No, alhamdulillah, I wanted to hear that because they was clear. Not only was it haram, but I asked the question because I am an avid boxing fan, that it was haram to watch. And I was like, wow. So I wanted to ask you that question.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't run with that. You're not doing nothing wrong watching boxing. Alhamdulillah, you're not doing nothing wrong watching it. And it's interesting because there's another aspect of these kind of questions and conversations that I think we as Muslims sometimes shy away from, particularly Muslims who are teaching. We like to keep things real, kind of like straightforward. This is halal, this is haram, this is makruh, this is why, and we like to position it in almost like a universal kind of sense, right? But there's also context. There's also culture. There's also the time you live in. In 2022, in America, if someone likes to watch boxing, alhamdulillah, because there's much worse things that they could be watching. Like we had this conversation with some of our teachers when they talk about music, right? And it's like our teachers are our teachers in Senegal are of the opinion that music is permissible, unless there's something in the music that's haram or the music has a bad effect on the listener. Sheikh Amin, I think, was a little bit more conservative about it. He said it depends on the context. If you want to listen to music with your spouse to kind of set the mood, that's permissible. But just listening to music just for enjoyment, I don't think he really liked that, right? But when we asked them a little bit more, like, what about like the Muslim hip hop artists and stuff like that? He said, no, there's a place for that. There's a place for that. He said, the reason why I'm not going to come and just say music is permissible is, he said, because I might like to listen to, like, there was a group back in the day called Native Deen that did, like, a Muslim group that did drums and like spoken word and whatnot. But if I say that, somebody else is going to take that as me giving them the green light to listen to like the nastiest, craziest, wildest music that they might be, But I saw from that, Sheikh Amin and all of our teachers, they understand context, and a part of understanding context is also understanding that when you live in a moment where there's so many, give you another example. If you look in the books, they'll tell you that chess is makruh, right? Because it's seen as something that a person can get caught up in and start to waste their time. Not haram, but makruh, right? But in 2022 in America, if you find a young woman or a young man who likes to play chess, this may be a good thing because it shows that they're more interested in sharpening their mind and things like that, as opposed to the other pastimes that we have that they didn't have 1,000 years ago or even a couple of 100 years ago that are far more problematic. You following what I'm saying?
Yes, alhamdulillah. And I do also play chess.
Alhamdulillah. I do too. I do too. So these, this is like I said, a lot of times people who even teach fiqh, they may be shy away from this kind of stuff because they're hesitant to sort of give people permission to just kind of just have free reign. But we have to know the times we live in. The Prophet ﷺ said the permissible is clear and the haram is clear, but in between them there's a gray area, and the person who avoids the gray area saves their religion, right? And of course, Rasulullah ﷺ speaks the truth. One of the later scholars from the 18th century, so much closer to our time, he said, yes, but he also said the gray is better than the black. And, when I say gray and black in this situation, we don't mean black like black skin. We're not talking bad about blackness, right? But we just mean black in the sense of the things that you should avoid, the things that you should clearly avoid versus the things that are questionable. The questionable thing is better than the thing that you should clearly avoid. And as we get further and further, toward the last day, you find that it becomes harder and harder to completely separate yourself from the questionable things. You can even make the argument that just living life in the global economy that's based on capitalism and debt and riba and all of that, you're not ever going to be able to completely free yourself from things that are questionable, right? And so living in this time, we have to be more sort of compassionate and act out of rahmah with regard to how we teach this deen, whether you're the fiqh teacher or whether you're just a parent teaching it to your children, or you're the Muslim giving dawah to your friends. You have to, maintain a level of compassion. Doesn't mean you go to the extreme and just say everything is fine, do what you want to do. But we do have to recognize that we live in a time where it's harder and harder to stay away from things that are questionable. That's, I did a lot of tangents and soapboxes today. So I'm going to stop there. Does anybody have any final questions before we close out? Any more questions? Inshallah. Questions or comments or clarifications? Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Martial arts is of the sunnah. I think maybe next week I try to remember to bring a hadith that talks about how the Sahabas dealt with things like wrestling and whatnot, because that's an important sunnah for us to revive. Sheikh Amin said when he was coming up studying from Dr. Dunya Rahmatullah, he had a group of the Muslims that he was training in martial arts. Sheikh Amin was always big on martial arts since he was a young man. And Sheikh Amin would go in behind the masjid, and there'd be like a field, and he'd be training the Muslims in that field, and they'd be doing their reps. And Dr. Dunya, he would come out over the balcony and he would look just very approving and nodding his head like, this is good, So this is a big sunnah we have to revive. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Inshallah, we will stop there for today. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Al-asr. Innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره العظيم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا مسلمين. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من فتنة المحيا والممات, من فتنة القبر, ومن فتنة المسيح الدجال, ومن عذاب النار وسوء المصير. Oh Allah, we seek that. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من الهم والحزن, ونعوذ بك من العجز والكسل, ونعوذ بك من الجبن والبخل, ونعوذ بك من قلب الدين وقهر الرجال. Oh Allah, we seek that refuge from anxiety and grief. We seek that refuge from lack of strength and laziness. We seek that refuge from cowardliness and niggardliness, and we seek that refuge from debt and the oppression of people. Bijah Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. اللهم أرنا حق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه, وأرنا باطلا باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا منك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. Before we close out, we want to make dua, Fatiha, and for those who we're going to say Fatiha, and for those who know it, 3 Salatul Fatih for 2 of our elders who have passed away. 2 of our one is one of our elders from the Jamaat who is in Senegal, Tahida. Tahida was a sister who was one of the pioneers of the Tijani community here in the US. She's one of the first to sacrifice to take her daughter to Medina Bay to study. And she sacrificed a lot. She was from a working class background. She worked multiple jobs to be able to make it possible for her daughter to go. And she actually moved there and was a big supporter and like one of the sort of mothers of the young people studying there. And also one of our brothers in Philly, Brother Bahir, who I had the honor and privilege to get to know a little bit when I was living in Philly, but someone who was committed to serving the community. He was one of the leaders of an organization called Al-Ma'un that Sidi Hassan is involved in, where they were just serving the people, giving dawah through service and whatnot. Inshallah, maybe next week we can talk a little bit more about Brother Bahir. The only reason I'm not asking the brothers to do it now is because I want to make the dua before people have to leave. So inshallah ta'ala, we want to make dua for both of them. Inshallah, we'll do Fatiha, and we'll do 3 Surah Ikhlas, Qul Huwallahu Ahad, and then 3 Salatul Fatih for those who know it. If you don't know it, then just say 3 prayers on the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, whatever prayer on the Prophet that you know, inshallah. This is for our beloved community members who passed away. Tahida, may Allah have mercy on it, and Brother Bahir, may Allah have mercy on him. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره العظيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره العظيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for reminding us to make the dua. Jazakumullah khair. Inshallah, we'll see you next week. Feel free to reach out if you need before then. Alhamdulillah. Shukran. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam, Dr. Habib. Shukran.
Alhamdulillah. Fine. Alhamdulillah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Doctor.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for that, man. Appreciate you.
Alhamdulillah.